Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Well, there is a lot of activity going on in the northeast sector of the conflict, running from Kupiansk down towards Lyman. As we have talked about before, Russian forces are massing in this area, again, running from the east of Seversk, north of Seversk, all the way north towards Kupiansk. There appears to be upwards to 100,000 Russian forces massing in this area, accompanied by anywhere from 900 to 1,100 main battle tanks, hundreds of additional armored fighting vehicles, and self-propelled artillery and multiple launch rocket systems are now operating in this area. Right now, the Ukrainians are being very hesitant in releasing information. We are seeing maps not being updated in some areas. In the area we're looking at right now, the Russians have penetrated Ukrainian lines more than 1 mile. They have broken through certain areas of the main Ukrainian defensive belt in this area and continue offensive operations against Ukrainian forces. Compounding that, Russian forces, Russian air assets continue to pummel Ukrainian ground units. Every day we are seeing between 30 and 100 ground attack missions by Russian aircraft. In conjunction, we are seeing the Russian using large amounts of multiple launch rocket systems, heavy artillery, and cruise and ballistic missiles against Ukrainian targets. Over the last 48 hours, we have seen concerted strikes against targets in Odessa. We have seen strikes in Mykolaiv. We have seen strikes by Russian forces throughout the southwestern quadrant of the conflict. We believe that many of these strikes are in retaliation for the Ukrainian strike that occurred on the Kerch Strait Bridge. That successful strike led at least to the partial outage of transport from Russia proper to Russia proper, the Crimean Peninsula. Now, what's going to happen next? Well, I think at this point we are going to see the Russians testing the Ukrainian lines in the area of Kupiansk, in the area east of Izium, east of Lyman. I think at this point it's highly likely the Russians could focus on seizing the town of Lyman. Let's convert over to the actual satellite locale. So Lyman is a crucial supply hub for Ukrainian forces in the support of Ukrainian forces operating in Seversk and north of Lyman as well. So a very tenuous situation for the Ukrainians. If you'll notice that the areas south of where a lot of the fighting is taking place, east of Lyman, north of Seversk, there are lots of trees, lots of forest, lots of built-up areas, and there continues to be very heavy fighting taking place in these areas. We have seen Russians deploy their Terminator tank support vehicles in this area in addition to other armored fighting vehicles, while also using Spetsnaz troops operating in this forested area, and Russian airborne forces as well. To the north, it opens up quite a bit and becomes fairly open with these more or less hedgerows that separate these open fields. Again, you have these forested areas that separate a lot of these fields. And this is the area where the Russians have made recent breakthroughs in some of these large maneuver operations that have started by Russian forces. I think we've seen within the past 24 hours a fairly large maneuver operation with a battalion-set tactical group, possibly even stronger than that, penetrating Ukrainian lines in this area. It doesn't appear to be an all-out offensive. The Russians are trying to gauge and then fix Ukrainian positions. And then obviously once they do that, the Russians bring in lots of artillery, they bring in drones, they bring in aircraft to then pummel these Ukrainian positions. And that's kind of what we're seeing in this conflict. And it's possible that morale for Ukrainian forces is starting to wane in this area. Day in and day out, they are being hit by Russian forces, be it artillery, long-range multiple launch rocket systems, attack helicopter gunships, fixed-wing aircraft. It's really continues for the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians don't have that air force, and they are really at a distinct disadvantage because the Russians do possess an air force. In the south, we continue to see things stagnate for Ukrainian forces. The Ukrainians continue probing operations. They continue light infantry operations in the south, running from Orikhiv east to Volhodar. But again, it does appear that the main Ukrainian effort, the main Ukrainian objective in this recent counteroffensive that started around June 4th was unsuccessful. And the Ukrainians continue to try and pick at the Russian forward observation posts that run along the line of contact, but the Ukrainians have not made it to the main Russian defensive perimeter in the south region. So right now, we are gauging that the Russians have taken initiative in this conflict. As we were watching the conflict unfold up to about the early part of June, it was safe to say that the Ukrainians were building initiative. And a lot of what was going to happen in terms of future-facing activity was predicated on the success of this Ukrainian offensive operation that took place in the Zaporizhzhia area. That failed. They took lots of casualties in that counteroffensive, 30 to 35% casualties thus far in a lot of these trained and equipped NATO brigades that were pushed forward. Now, what's filling the line is mainly light infantry units, elements of Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, Yager forces, and territorial defense forces have been pushed forward to continue the perception of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. But the Ukrainian counteroffensive has failed. That's why we're seeing this Russian maneuver operation, or this probing operation. We're not sure what to make of it just yet, but it's large, and we know that there are a lot of Russian forces that have built up in this area. So that's where we stand for today. Obviously, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button. Feel free to go to the About section, and you can support us there. Obviously, through that mechanism, and then you can also do super thanks if you choose to do so as well. So again, thanks for joining us today. More to come very, very soon. Have a good day.